Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Panos Sessions. I am your moderator, former intern, current account coordinator Jordan Julio, and I'm joined today by our senior web designer Andrew Zeller and web designer Chelsea London. And we'll be discussing UX and UI design and the ins and outs of some commonly asked questions and kind of just work through what it is, what it's used before, and where it's going in the future. Without further ado, I'll let each one of you to introduce yourself quickly. I'll start with you, Andrew.
I'm Andrew Zeller, senior web designer here at Panos. I've been doing websites for over 10 years and been with Panos for 7 of those years. I think that's good.
Perfect. Chelsea?
I'm Chelsea London. I am a web designer at Panos. I've been with Panos over 2 years, but I have experience with UX design for a bunch of different industries. The gaming industry for one, the financial industry is another. So yeah, there's different approaches depending on, the industry you're in. So.
No, absolutely. Definitely a well-rounded crew that we have here for a nice webinar. So I'll just get us started. So coming in from a background of, limited knowledge, what is like the major difference between UI and UX, user interface and user experience?
I could take that one. It can get a little deep, but I think to kind of break it down to being very simple and easy to get, when you look at them each separately, what is UI? The user interface, it's stuff like the graphical layout of an application, the buttons, how they're designed, where they're put, the text that the user is reading, how you're using images, where they're being placed, uh, text entry fields, where information is being put in, and even the animations that you use and how they can kind of guide the user through different parts and processes. So then on the other side, the user experience there is really how does someone interact with this website or the app. And it can kind of be maybe a little bit more emotional in the sense of, is the experience smooth and intuitive, or was it clunky and confusing? Does the navigation feel like it makes sense? Is it logical? Or is it arbitrary and not helping out the user get around this this app or website? When a user goes there, do they feel like they accomplished their task? The elements that were designed, are they operating the way they expect them to? And really, at the end of the day, were they happy or frustrated when they were on your site or using the app?
Right, that's a very intuitive, high-level approach to it, and definitely painted a clear picture for myself. I know I've been on a plethora of financial institutions websites where I look at certain tabs and things they don't perform as well as other sites, and so just having that, making sure your website is consistently being updated, reaching benchmarks, industry benchmarks, making sure it's ADA compliant, and just being up to par with the leaders in the industry is definitely something that I'm sure I recommend, as you both would as well. Um, could you provide like a metaphor and an example to help simplify the concept of UI UX design to someone like me?
Yeah, so I have a couple different analogies. Excuse me. I have a couple different analogies that you can use to sort of represent UI and UX. It does oversimplify things, but it gives you a good idea, a good visual to help solidify the differences and also why they need to be used together. You can't really have, in the terms of digital products, apps, games, websites, you can't really have UX without UI, and vice versa. Even though they're technically different, they're still very much intertwined. So the analogy that I default to is the ketchup bottle analogy. So you go to a diner and you have, that fancy glass ketchup bottle, but at home you have the plastic squeeze ketchup bottle. And the one that you find at the diner is equivalent to UI, and the one that you find at home is equivalent to UX. So the glass ketchup bottle, when Heinz or whoever made that bottle, they were thinking, like, the most aesthetic way we can make this. You know, what is the bottle made out of? What does the label look like? What's the color of the cap? What's the shape of the bottle? That's UI essentially, right? So in websites, what should be the color of this button? You know, what kind of typography are we using? What kind of icons are we using to indicate, a step in a process, that sort of thing. But when you actually use a glass ketchup bottle, it's really frustrating, especially when there's not a lot of ketchup left. You have to like get a knife and dig it out, and it's not a
Becomes a
great
process.
it's not a great user
Right.
experience. So like the squeezy bottle is, the people who made the squeeze ketchup bottle were asking things like, how do we get the most ketchup out of this bottle as possible? How do we get it onto people's fries easier, right?
Mhm.
Those are the differences in the questions that they're asking. And um, so in a web sense, UX would be, do we even need this button? Why do we need this button? What should the position of this button be? So
Mhm.
that's the difference. Um, but like I said, that's oversimplifying things, and you kind of need both in order to have a good user experience on a website or on an app. Another way you can think of it is, say you're in a fancy city, you're in New York City, and you're appreciating how big the city is, and its energy and its beauty. And then your stomach growls and you're like, oh, I really want to go to a good restaurant. And so when you go into this restaurant, you see the tables and the chairs, the plates, the glasses, the utensils. Basically whatever you see is UI, or an equivalent of UI. um, but the UX of that restaurant is everything from the food to the service, the background music, the ambiance, the parking, the lighting. I- And if you leave that restaurant happy, that means that you had a good user experience. But you need both of those things in order to make you need the aesthetic as well as the experience in order to make a good user experience on web or with a product as well.
Yeah, no, that was a great simplified but high-level overview. I love the ketchup bottle analogy. That's wonderful. Then the restaurant analogy really painted that picture and solidified it for me. I have a question. Have you ever seen a website have a really good aesthetic, a good interface, but a really awful experience, a really bad UX? I hope I phrased that correctly. But do those exist?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you say that they're like common in the financial institution realm? Because I've seen some websites that have really, yeah, like really bad UI but really good UX, and I've seen vice versa. I guess you could argue. But it's definitely something that's super interesting. So it is common.
uh Usually when it has bad UI, what we tend to see is it also has bad UX,
Right. Hand in hand.
usually because the website is outdated.
Mhm.
And uh there's this common effect on people that if something doesn't look good,
Right.
then they are less likely to trust that it will work well.
Of course. Yeah. Like a new dish.
So,
Right. Right.
so usually when I come to a website and it doesn't look good, I will assume that it doesn't work well either.
Right.
um,
Right. High abandonment rate. Right.
yeah, right. So, typically they go hand in hand. I mean, I have seen websites that are very attractive, but are difficult to navigate or introduce some kind of weird navigation that you're not familiar with, um, that you have to learn, um, that can sort of impact the way that the experience that you have with it. Something that isn't super common. Um, Having the menu on the side, on the left-hand side, as opposed to on the right-hand side, as if it's a hamburger menu, having it on the right-hand side, or if it's just a standard navigation up at the top, like we're used to seeing, right? So if someone does something different, like put it in a different location, then it might take, a couple more seconds, and that doesn't seem like a long time, but seconds is everything in making up the user's mind on whether or not they want to interact with your website. So it might take a couple of seconds for them to identify what they're supposed to do. Um, Now I don't mean to say that these websites are completely bad. Like I do think that there should be experimentation and we should keep on pushing the envelope. But at the same time, we don't have to reinvent the wheel on a website that people need to access, like a financial institution website, their bank or their credit union, right? Like we don't have to make it overly complicated. We can make it simple, not simplistic, but simple and easy to use, right? Because we don't really want them to have to learn something in order to access their checking account. You know what I mean? So there's a time and a place for experimental UI and UX. That's my answer to that.
Right. No, that was really good. Totally valid. I really like the analogy of the seconds because it's true. If you're in a competitive industry such as a financial institution and you have someone, a customer who is really just looking for a really quality, simple savings account, and your website, it's like hidden deep in it. It's just not easy to navigate, and people can't, find what they're looking for. They're going to jump over to a competitor. So those extra seconds are very crucial, and I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that. I've
Oh, of course, yeah.
I've dropped my credit union because I hated their website and I hated the
Right.
experience of the user, even the user experience of actually going into the branch, I I detested it so much that I made a move to a different bank, right? Because and it's usually when you have someone like within, the interacting with you or engaging with you, a lot of times, those people don't want to put in the effort to change banks. It's a lot of effort and they'd rather not to, right? But
Right.
if you actually can manage to, repel your users enough that they are, willing to flee and go to somewhere else, then
Right.
you should probably be thinking, oh, maybe we should change this
Yeah. So
experience.
definitely, if customers are jumping ship, then it's definitely time to reevaluate and create a strategy and figure out what needs to be adjusted. No, totally agree. Um, so moving forward here, how do people read and engage with these web pages, and how do we the user interface, like what is the engagement factor that you're seeing in the space?
I think you could almost boil it down to just a few words, which is that people really aren't reading everything.
Right.
They're just scanning.
Sure.
When they get to a web page, they're scanning. And I mean, you only have to think about yourself as the user in the scenario and how you interact with a website and pages and such. And I think a good rule that we've adopted here when we kind of talk to clients about redesigning their website is, take all your copy that you wrote and you think is very important and you want everyone to know every detail, and then cut that in half.
Right.
And then cut it in half one more time. We're not the inventor of that, but we definitely like it and we believe it because, just kind of get out of people's way, tell them what they need to know. And you do that at different levels throughout a site on different pages and with different opportunities. Let people know what they need to know quickly. And if they need to dig a little deeper, you then provide those answers for that person who wants to go a little deeper. Don't front load all of that information and make you have to dig through it. Get people where they want to go when they choose to get there, and then they can absorb as much as they need to. And so from kind of a design sense, to kind of piggyback to what we were just talking about a little bit, and I think Chelsea made the perfect point that UI and UX are always going together, but that's why our process here, something we do completely early on, and especially in our wireframes, is we're focusing on the user experience first and where things are going to go and how to lay out a page. And definitely with the navigation, we want to put navigation in buckets that make sense. So when someone comes to the website, they already know what they're there for. They're especially with a financial institution, they're very goal oriented when they're on your site. They already know what they're there for, whether it's logging in or finding out about certain products. So you want to structure that to get them there fastest. And then when they reach the part looking at a new checking account, quickly seeing the checking accounts, and if they need to dig a little deeper, give them that opportunity. And so from just a navigational sense, that's kind of one way you do it. But then when we're laying out and designing a page, we're also doing that from kind of the UI sense of using H2 and H3s, which would be what you would think of kind of title text, big text, then smaller subhead or caption text, and then your actual copy. And icons help you do that. Icons kind of help tell a little bit without needing to necessarily know what the word is that's going with them, but also help your eyes stop and anchor there. And then, images play a small role in this too. You can't quite always say everything you need to with an image, but using images properly, you kind of help get people where they need to go to that information a little faster.
Right. I think a lot of there's a real argument that it's generational. Different generations engage with websites differently, where content is and how they perceive it. I think obviously the older generations, making sure things are simple and clear and concise is critical, but that also relates down to the younger generations where they don't have the time nor the attention span to really dig in. They just want to know what they need to know, how it works, what's the price behind it, what would they owe, etc. So I think with engaging in 2021 on the web space, definitely take time to assess your audience, but understand that things do shift generationally with different age groups.
And yeah, sorry. And to expand on that a little bit more, this is why visual hierarchy is really important. So there's lots of methods and tools at our disposal in order to actually psychologically control people like where they look and how they engage with the page. So again, like Andrew was saying, having the H2s and the H3s and sort of defining sections like that, it gives the user a visual cue for them to basically, we're enabling them to scan, right? So if an older person is going to read the whole page, they're going to do that anyway. Having headers and clearly defined headers and clearly defined sections will only help them do that. But for younger folks who don't have the time, they're goal oriented and looking for a specific piece of information, that is even more important to have those visual cues and that clearly defined visual hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. I think the younger generations, they want it and they want it quick and they want it simple. So piggybacking off of that, what do you two feel is the next biggest thing in user experience UX design?
For me, there's a lot of specializations within user experience. So we have things like customer experience, emotional experience, human experience, public experience, and voice experience. I think I mean, those specializations are really important, but it's probably also really niche and defined, like kind of laser focused on the product or industry that you're working in. But more generally, what I'm seeing is a huge growth in voice experience and extended reality, and the experience that goes with extended reality. So, I mean, we're starting to see both of those things enter our daily lives more and more, right? We have Siri on our phones. We have the I'm trying not to say her name because she'll turn on and she's right next to my computer. But
These
we
will not be
have,
named.
yeah, we have the Echo, we have Google Home, we have Apple HomePods. So we have all of these voice activated assistants, and there is user experience that goes into that, right? How, I don't know if you've ever like kind of stopped and tried to think about what you're trying to ask your assistant before, because sometimes you're like, how do I phrase this so that, and essentially a piece of software will understand what I'm trying to say. So yeah, so basically how we interface with that is requires a lot of user experience, um, thought and process behind it. Um, and then extended reality, that includes things like AR, augmented reality, VR, virtual reality, and MR, mixed reality, kind of blends a bunch of different things together. So augmented reality, that's things like I saw, my coworker showed me a really cool app where she basically held her phone up to the horizon when we were on a hike, and it showed the different peaks on her phone. So that's an example of augmented reality. Pokemon Go is augmented reality. If you're, into mobile games like that. Virtual reality, not just for games. There's going to be a huge market for it for education, for even travel, um, uh, training, training experiences. So that's going to be really all encompassing. So that's probably the next biggest thing, and we're really seeing the importance of UX, especially after the pandemic. Actually, I think that's a question that you might have. So I'll wait.
Yeah,
I'll wait to answer. I'll wait to answer that.
yeah, no, absolutely. The augmented reality and the virtual reality aspects to everything, I definitely, as the technology age goes further and further down the line, the inclusion of tech with our everyday lives, even after the pandemic, but just like something like this, a Teams call, we are able to work and do things over, the internet and through technology. And it's only become more and more prevalent as we age further, and definitely in the financial institution or financial industry as a whole, we're going to see it more and more, as well as with the entire world, which is definitely, it's nerve-wracking, but at the same time, it's fun and it's exciting, and there's so much we can do ahead in the horizon, which is great. But yes, to piggyback off of what you just said, what is the real value? I know we talked about UX a ton so far, but like, what is the real value and importance behind it?
Yeah. So, um, as we've explained, UX designers really focus on the experience that users have while using products like, websites, apps, and even physical products, physical objects. And w- basically, UX makes those everyday interactions useful and enjoyable and accessible. And all of those things are really important. And that's why organizations and industries of all kinds need to take UX seriously. Um, and we've really seen for the past year and a half that UX has a real human and economic importance, um, more than we've given it credit for, right? We may have taken UX for granted until the pandemic hit, and then everyone was stuck in isolation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then, you're trying to talk to grandma, and the voice is breaking up, or she can't figure out how to unmute herself because where's the mute where's the
Mm-hmm.
mute button? I
Yep.
don't see it on the screen. And and then that's when you realize, oh, this has not the greatest user experience, even for, and there were things that we couldn't even do, like, normal things that didn't even exist online before, like going in and talking to a banker, right? And how do we take something that was really only ever existed physically or in person and put that online? And how do we approach the user experience behind that, so that we can make it accessible and, people for people who are stuck at home or it's not safe for them to go out. And this is really only going to continue to expand, when, as companies are recognizing that designing a good user experience is a necessity for their brand, for them to survive in 2021 and beyond.
I mean, you're the perfect example, Chelsea. You already said it. People will leave.
Yeah. I mean,
user experience, and they've definitely
right. If you don't have,
and yeah.
You might have found, like, some local restaurants might not have even had a website before the pandemic, right? Like
Exactly.
it's just a mom and pop shop. You would go in, get a menu, just call them up, or maybe they had just like a picture of their menu on their Facebook page. But, like, so many products, so many brands just won't be able to survive without having that presence online, right? And even they'll survive even, you know for a shorter amount of time, rather, if they don't have a good user experience. Because, if I can't use your website, if I can't make an online order, then I'm just going to find a different restaurant, so.
Exactly, and that's why many financial institutions are seeing something like that, and how if they can't do it on your site, they're going to move on and do it on someone else's site. So it's critical to be, up with the times and consistently evolving, and again, looking at your strategy and where you are, where you need to be.
Yeah.
So to piggyback on that again, talk us through the audience through your workflow with developing a UI or UX design.
I could go first for that. Uh, there's kind of a macro and a micro way of talking about this. Us being an institution that works with financial institutions, specifically, we are kind of good in that sense that we're kind of working with a niche industry, so we've learned it really, really well. And when it kind of comes to the workflow, I think something that kind of gets echoed a lot that's really honestly severely outdated is, mobile first. And I don't even like saying that anymore, because it's not mobile first. It's, user experience first. It's website and mobile. It's at the same time. One is not more important than the other, especially when it comes to financial institutions. And we see how people interact with your site. It's higher in one metric than another, depending on how they got there. Logging in, how they use their online banking. So it's definitely not mobile first. It's user experience first. And very quick overflow. Like I mentioned, we start with sitemap. We're going to learn how to set out the site right so people get where they need to go quickly and easily. And then wireframes is how we show that they're going to get there. And designs last, because design is great, but that's just about establishing and cementing that hierarchy a little bit more and just making it look interesting. And I think I could do a whole other talk about the design side of all of this. But I think instead of kind of talking about everything, I want to kind of focus on one little thing. And what's brought up to us a lot as of late, and something I would think you could say it's growing. It's definitely been growing, but we don't see a whole huge adoption yet. And that is kind of how we're handling mobile navigation. And for people listening at home, if you want to grab your phone real quick and go to pitchfork.com on your phone specifically, I think this is a good guinea pig to talk about. What Pitchfork has done is they put their navigation at the bottom of their mobile site. And they were kind of an early adopter at it. They got a lot of attention for this when they did it. And just look at it, think about it a little bit. And I'll kind of throw some rhetorical questions out, and you tell us what you think about the user experience here. But what they've done is they put their navigation at the bottom of their mobile site. And what's great about that? Well, my thumb is right there. Most people, left or right-handed, your thumb is down there at the bottom. I don't have to reach up and hit the hamburger in the traditional upper right spot. I don't have to move my hand at all. But did you notice it? Did you miss it at first? Depending on the mobile browser you're using, whether it be a Google, Firefox, Apple, when you start scrolling, their toolbars come up. So now the pitchfork toolbar has moved. Was that jarring for you now that it jumped up? Should these mobile browser people be aware of things like this, of this trend, stop having their toolbars pop up like that? The icons there, do they make sense to you? Do you know what they are going to be before you open them? Do you want people having to do what we call an exploratory click? They're going to have to click on that to maybe know what some of those icons mean. Once you open the main menu and you see all of their links that you can go to, is it convenient for your thumb to hit most of those? Is it hitting in that kind of 70-degree swipe area where most people's thumbs can conveniently reach? I don't know. I could probably keep kind of going on about this, but I think it's an interesting little case study of user experience. It's familiar to something you're probably very aware of, which is your apps. If you open up your Facebook app, they have a toolbar down there. That's where all those things are. So it's starting to kind of echo into mobile design. But are we ready to fully embrace it yet? Are people looking down there still? Are they comfortable with those motions when they're so used to going up there with their finger, removing their hand, touching something and putting it back? When do we push that? When is it, okay, this is a better experience and people will adapt and learn to that? So it's kind of just a bunch of fun little case study to think about there.
Yeah,
that
so
was a good example.
oh, sorry.
You go ahead, Justin.
Basically, so you can sort of boil down, the workflow or the design thinking into a couple of stages, and a lot of what Andrew just explained was um, empathizing with your user, which is a really, really important part of user experience. So these 5 stages are, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Testing would be a lot more important for things like apps, and like actual product, like digital products, like the software products is what I mean by that. You know what I mean? So, empathizing, that's when you're learning about your audience, what their pain points are, what's frustrating them, what they like, so you don't get rid of features that they like or depend on. Defining, this is you constructing a point of view that's based on that audience's needs, the insights that you've gained from your observations and learning about your users. Ideating, it's just coming up with creative solutions. Prototyping, these are your wireframes. This is representing the creative solution that you thought up with in the ideate stage. So your wireframes and your designs, and then as I said, testing, a little bit more focus on testing in the app software realm. But that's essentially when you turn over that product and whatever stage it's usable stage that it's in, and have that user group test it and give their feedback, and then it's a cycle, right? You just once you get those results at the end of tests, you just go back to the beginning, and you just agilely go through the process until it's ready to roll out.
Right. So, and this is my last question here. I'll wrap up the webinar shortly. However, I have to know the answer to this one. So you mentioned, your process, your workflows, you have your design ready, and you hand it off to the team. The team comes back with feedback and they say, I don't like this design. What happens next?
Well, I have an answer for this. Andrew, I don't know if you wanted to give your
I think I know
opinion.
what you're gonna say, but I might expand on it, but yeah, go for it.
So when someone says I don't like this, that's really vague. And usually that's a misalignment, between what the client was looking for and maybe just didn't express or, define it well enough, and maybe they didn't have the words to do that. So there's the misalignment between what the client was looking for and what the designer was trying to achieve. And so at that point, you basically would take a step back and start asking questions to the client. I don't like this is subjective. So why don't you like it? Well, I don't like the color red. Well, that's your own personal feelings about it, but what the client is really doing is they're not empathizing with their user. They're thinking, I personally don't like red, so therefore we cannot have red anywhere on the site.
Right.
No red, because I don't like it. But that's not a really good way to approach it, right? Because you are not your user.
There
You
it
need
is.
to you need to
There we
you are
go.
not your user. You need
If she
to
didn't say it, I was gonna say it.
yeah. So you need to empathize with your user, and a lot of the reasonings, the decisions that we come to are based in theory and objectivity and sound principles, not opinion. So basically, if someone doesn't like it and it's for subjective reasons, we'll just try, to explain to them, you know, well, this is the design thinking, and um, we need to think about what is going to work for your users. And maybe red is being used in a really prominent way to help guide a user through a certain flow, and using a more like a cooler color or something that doesn't pop out as much won't be as effective. And so kind of explaining it that way, we can probably come to either a compromise or an understanding, because maybe the client wasn't thinking of it in that way, right? So
Right. That clear line of communication is definitely critical. Andrew, do you have any further thoughts on that?
I mean, Chelsea did a pretty good job. I think anything I could say, anything she said. It's just
Right.
remember you are not your user. And, when it comes to kind of Panos and who we are professionals at making financial institution sites. We've been doing it for a long time, and we follow the data a lot too. We know not only what trends are, but we also know what financial customers are looking for, and we follow your specific data. We have the analytics. We know what the most searched things are on your site. We know what people are trying to find the quickest. And again, that's why we spend substantial amount of time of any project with a client on the sitemap wireframe stage, because we're trying to get that foundation solid. And something that, like one little specific nugget about this of we hear I don't like X is when we're talking about sitemap and wireframes. It's again, I guess my thing for today is the navigation, because I do find it to be such a key element. But it would be like, hey, enough people aren't opening X. Let's put that in the main navigation. And it's like your navigation's not a advertisement opportunity. It's not a promotion opportunity. We want that to be laid out for the users to get where they're going as quickly as possible, what we know users are looking for and what we know your users are looking for. And we're going to make this thing maybe that's not getting opened enough, we're going to make it through other channels easier to find. We're going to relaying out your site, but again, you're not your user. You kind of gotta trust us a little bit. We're gonna get you where you need to go, because we follow the data.
Yeah, so definitely Panos is all in for your success. Had to get the tagline in there. But yeah, that wraps up our UI UX webinar. I want to thank you both, Andrew and Chelsea, for the great your time and the great webinar today.
Yeah, thank you
And
for
yeah,
having us.
no problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
my pleasure. Alrighty, guys, have a great one. Appreciate it.